There aren't many operas that I think opera lovers would describe as perfect. It's a very difficult medium to get right, and even some of the greatest operas, even some of Mozart's, have their flaws, for instance. Many others do as well. But if there's one candidate for a perfect opera, it's Bartók's one-act opera, Bluebeard's Castle. It's an extraordinary piece, though, and I must say, I must warn you, it's one of the saddest pieces I think I know in the entire classical repertory. It's also one of the very few occasions where the notoriously private and very carefully defended Béla Bartók, I think, allows us to see deep within his own soul. It's a piece which, as it takes us on a very strange and extraordinary journey, a journey which halfway through seems to be reaching out towards some sort of hope, but then it all unwinds terribly towards the end. I'll outline the story. Basically, Bluebeard has married a new wife, Judith, and brought her to his castle. It's a dark, forbidding, dank place. And in it, in the central room, are 7 doors, all of them shut. Judith is fearful, but she's also determined. She wants to know about her husband. She's heard rumors about him, rumors about what happened to his other wives, and she wants to prove those rumors wrong. So she asks Bluebeard to open the doors. One by one he does, with considerable and growing resistance. And in each room, she sees an extraordinary thing. She sees, for instance, a collection of weapons, or a garden, or later on, an amazing vista out over Bluebeard's castle. And yet in each, there's something very uneasy, something that suggests, well, maybe the color of blood, maybe shadows of blood. Has Bluebeard got a dark secret? Does the 7th door contain the murdered bodies of his previous wives? Judith goes more and more determined. And at one, it seems for a while that Bluebeard himself is caught by her hope, as though there's a feeling that, yes, it's possible to know another human being right through to their darkest, shadowiest side and still love them. He almost seems to cling to the belief that Judith's desire to find what it is that's happened behind these doors might be his own salvation. A terrific moment exactly halfway through when she opens one door and sees Bluebeard's kingdom, when there's a fantastic outburst from the full orchestra, extra brass and an organ, just a series of magnificent, dazzling major chords. And yet almost immediately, there's the sound of something else uneasy rustling in the background. After that visionary 5th door opening on the vast landscape of Bluebeard's kingdom comes a real reversal. The door opens on the lake of tears, and Bartók creates the most extraordinary sound effect. Low xylophone, harps, low clarinets, little roll on the drum to suggest these strange waves in the lakes of tears, shuddering almost. And Judith now is convinced that she knows whose tears these are. They are the tears of Bluebeard's murdered wives. And she demands ferociously, despite Bluebeard's pleas, that he open the 7th door. What she discovers inside there is not murdered bodies, but something in a way still more astonishing and even chilling. The wives are still there, alive. And Bluebeard says, now that you've opened this door, you must join them. And he crowns her with a crown like the crown he's given the other wives. She protests, and yet there is nothing she can do. And Bluebeard is left alone on the stage at the end to the words, henceforth all shall be darkness. What on earth is this strange and sad parable all about? Well, on one level, it reminds me of a remark by the comedian Woody Allen, who said, I've always had a tendency to place my wives under a pedestal. In a way, that is quite possibly what this opera is all about. Yeah, but it's also maybe a very rare example of Bartók himself revealing himself. Bartók was, as I said, very guarded, very private. He very rarely showed his emotions in public. It's been suggested, for instance, that he had some form of autism. his fascination with numbers and proportions, his intense love of animals, but his strange coldness in reaction to human beings. His voice apparently was very even and modulated. He very, very rarely displayed much anger or intensity of any kind. And yet, deep down inside was obviously a very beating, very pained heart. Early on in his life, he'd fallen in love with a violinist called Steffi Geyer and had written a violin concerto for her, but she'd rejected him. And it seems that having been rejected like that, he decided never really to open himself again, even to his later to his wife, with whom he clearly had a very good relationship. Something remained hidden. In a sense, Bluebeard's Castle is Bartók's own story. That he feels that actually to open your heart is dangerous, very dangerous. You need to be absolutely sure of the person to whom you open it, because otherwise, as in the lovely poem by William Blake, never pain to tell your love, you end up, the moment you reveal it, the other person goes away. That was certainly Bartók's great anxiety. Out of it, he made this astonishing opera. I mean, I portrayed an opera which sounds pretty gloomy, but honestly, the effects in the orchestral writing, the extraordinary, gripping, compelling, arch-like structure of it, so that you feel you're, like you, Judith, you're caught up in this journey and have to go with her. You know, the marvelousness of the vocal writing too. Bartók writing for a language, Hungarian originally, which is sometimes quite difficult to sing. Doing something in the process that just is, well, it's one of those pieces that leaves you in a sense feeling, yes, I know what all this is about, but at the same time with so many riddles and puzzles too. It's some sort of challenge to all of us. How safe is intimacy? How intimate can we be? Will there always be something inside us that even the people who are closest to us will never know? And can we live with that? That, in a way, I think, is the challenge that Bluebeard's Castle throws down. But you're welcome to make of this extraordinary, powerful, and very atmospheric opera exactly what you want. Before this, fascinatingly, is another piece of music that comes out of a crisis in a very difficult marriage. Gustav Mahler treated his wife, Alma, as a kind of goddess, idol, and muse. At the same time, he forbade her to compose. We can't have two composers in one house, he told her emphatically as a condition before she married her. There were lots of strains and stresses in their marriages. I don't think Alma was a very lively mind, a very intelligent and creative woman in her own right. I don't think she really liked being Mrs. Gustav Mahler all the time. She wasn't that keen on being a mother either, although the loss of her elder daughter in 1907 was clearly a great, great blow to her, as it was indeed to Mahler's. A lot of marriages don't survive the death of a child, and it's not surprising to find that in 1910, the year Mahler began his unfinished 10th Symphony, Alma had an affair. Mahler discovered this while he was writing the 10th Symphony, and the shock, I was going to say nearly killed him, but it probably did weaken his already weak heart condition that led to his death the following year. You can hear him wrestling with all of this in the first movement, the completed first movement of the 10th Symphony, the Adagio, particularly at the terrifying climax in which an enormous dissonance is sounded out by the full orchestra with a trumpet hanging onto a high A right the way through this. It's almost like an alarm going off. It's a terrifying moment. Again, at the end does come some sort of peace, as though Mahler has been able to distance himself from this. Quite how? Well, we'd have had to have heard the rest of the symphony to hear that. And unfortunately, Mahler didn't quite finish it, but he did come close enough for it to be possible to make performing versions of his sketches. And they show us that eventually he worked his way through to something quite different by the end of the symphony, but still marital crisis, as in the case of Bartók's Bluebeard's Castle, is very much at the heart of the 10th Symphony of Mahler, and particularly the first movement. And it's more than marital crisis. It's the kind of crisis that leads you to question who you are yourself existentially. And again, how much is it possible for a human being to love another? That's the kind of question, it seems, that the incredibly ardent music of Mahler's 10th Symphony also asks. It's full of incredibly passionate, clearly love music. And yet, as I said, at the climax comes this terrifying vision. Yeah, we're complicated creatures, aren't we, human beings? And these are two of the greatest 20th century masterpieces at confronting that complexity, that extraordinary mixture of potential for joy and terrible sadness.